That's a real
That's a free
phenomenon.
market economy, I think.
No, I think it's more a
I,
social phenomenon in the U.S.
it's a structural phenomenon
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
because again, in any sense of fairness, okay, collective fairness, okay, you would take something from those folks who have more than they can ever use, okay,
yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
apply it to people who, because of their own circumstances, have difficulty, being making it through the day.
yeah, but that's I don't know, kind of a socialist way of thinking at things.
It from a political standpoint,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, but I would
ideological.
argue it's getting back to community. It's a community development standpoint, from what I see it.
Ok, Ion, suntem live? Ok, we're live. So,
Hey,
salutare dragilor! Începem din nou un nou sezon de Podcastul de Vineri. De data asta îl avem alături de noi și pe Marius Geru. L-ați
Salutare.
văzut pe Marius într-un episod, în episoadele noastre. Ceea ce vrem să facem sezonul ăsta este ce am făcut și sezonul anterior, și anume să vorbim cu oameni interesanți despre lucruri care mai de care. Până acum am avut ceva probleme tehnice, dar văd că s-au rezolvat. Și cam asta e. O să vă rog să ne lăsați pe parcursul podcastului de azi întrebările pe YouTube sau pe Facebook. Suntem și pe Twitch Live, nu știu dacă vă interesează neapărat Twitch ca și platformă, dar suntem și acolo. Dacă aveți întrebări pentru invitatul nostru, lăsați-le acolo, ele o să ajungă la noi într-un fel sau altul și o să le adresăm. Mai avem contul de Patreon, a rămas același, o să-l găsiți, nu știu dacă acum o să-l găsiți în descrierea videoclipului, dar o să fie. Ne puteți susține și acolo, e important fiind un proiect cumva autosusținut. Și hai să vorbim puțin despre invitatul de azi. Invitatul de azi este rector al Universității Danubius. Suntem în studioul Universității Danubius, studioul media al Universității Danubius, alături de William P. Harvey, rector al Universității de un an de acum. O să dăm în limba engleză acest podcast pentru că Harvey este american și în felul ăsta o să ne înțelegem mai bine cu el. El înțelege ceva română, dar nu 100%. Așa că mai bine vorbim în engleză și probabil că o să punem și o subtitrare în următoarele săptămâni, în funcție de cum ne permite timpul.
Vlad, cred că ar trebui să menționez că este primul rector american în România și cred că that's a start pentru noi ca și națiune.
Da, deci e primul rector american în România.
So maybe it
yeah,
should be
let's go
better
to English.
To move to English. Hello, Harvey. Thank you for having us here.
it's a pleasure to be back with you guys. About a year ago, I think we had our first encounter,
Yeah.
and it's great to pick it up from there.
Yeah. So you've been the I don't know what rector is in English.
It essentially is the equivalent of a university president in America.
Okay.
Right.
So you're the president.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. President. Let's sum it up a little bit. How is the first year of the experience of being the president of a Romanian university?
Yeah, there's no easy way to describe it. It's been ups and downs, mostly ups more than downs, but it's been a learning experience. You come from one system, one country, one culture to another. It takes a while to kind of get an understanding of how things work, of the way the system functions, of how you fit into it. People have been very thoughtful, very generous in terms of helping me do that. I think I've brought some things to the table in terms of ideas and approaches that were ones that I have used in other settings that I think will work here. So I think we've been able to find an accommodation where the important thing is we're all working together to try and make the university a better place.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the main thing, to leave things a little better than you found them.
A lot better.
A lot better. Well, that's the goal.
There you go.
Was it what you had in mind like a year ago before coming here?
For the most part, I'd only been here once before,
Okay.
but and that was 2013. I was invited to come to the institution, and that was when I met some of the people who are still here. So, I knew them. We've had some correspondence over the years, and I knew what the institution was about at its core.
Okay.
So when we were having the conversations about my coming here, it actually played on some conversations that we had years ago, which was that in order to be an international university, you have to have international ties and contacts and relationships. I've been in America for a long time. I've been in a lot of institutions. So in taking the job, one of the things that we all understood I was going to do was to use those contacts, those connections that I had, to bring some of those relationships and connections to Danubius. And I think we've had a good start with that.
That's amazing. And what I'm thinking of course, there are differences between these two cultures. What do you find authentic about Romanian culture? Where's the real value that we locals are not able to see?
You know, like looking at the forest and not seeing it
Yeah,
because of
right.
the trees.
The thing is this, I think when you're talking about cultures that are contrasting in some ways, and America is a highly kind of mechanized technological culture that has some benefits to it, has some downsides as well. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think what I experience every time I come here is a sense of connectedness, of friendliness and openness, and I think that the American perspective is one, and I'm overgeneralizing, of course, where it's not really all that important for us to make connections to people. We more connect to objects and to things and to material things.
Oh, I see.
So there's a kind of a better sense of engagement,
All right.
relationship that I think exists in Romania than you might expect to find in America.
Okay, but I mean, long story short, what I really wanted to know is, do you like sarmale or not?
Do I? Okay, well, I don't give short answers to anything, okay? I want to nuance the presentation to make sure that I can touch a lot of points here. Here's the thing, and I was just saying to you before, that I'm in the process right now of writing a note to some of my American counterparts, and I'm explaining to them why they should be here.
Okay.
It's not an easy sell, only because Romania specifically, and Eastern Europe more generally, is probably less known in America than maybe almost any other part of the world, okay? So essentially what I'm saying to people is, this is why you should be here. You should be here because it's a warm, friendly, authentic country where people are generous in terms of their personality, their outreach to you, and so forth. Okay. And for Americans, I'm speaking for myself now because I don't want to overgeneralize here.
Okay.
European engagements, they're always polite, but they're not always friendly.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've been to almost every country in Western Europe, and I've never had a bad time, but I've never really felt like people welcomed me. They tolerated me. You're in America, but there's a different sense of engagement here.
Okay. Okay.
So why do you think this is here in Romania so specific?
I think it's probably because there's less obvious and overt materialism here than there is in France and from what I've seen in Germany. And when I say materialism, I don't mean the interest in having things. I mean the conspicuous display of items, of goods. Everybody wants to have things.
Yeah.
But there are some cultures where the drive to have things is the essence of what the culture is all about. Now, it gets back to the comments that I was making before. There is, at least in my perspective, some sense of personal connection here that I think you lose when you take the approach and perspective that the most important thing for me to do is to have more things.
Yeah. So coming from a capitalist society like America,
Mhm.
where this is also somewhat the case from what we understand.
Yeah.
We haven't fully experienced it.
Right.
So coming from that,
Mhm.
going through Europe, through other cultures
Yeah.
that value materialism, and coming to Romania, and I think Bulgaria is pretty much the same,
Mhm.
and seeing the fact that people are mostly, I don't know, concentrated on having experiences, meeting people,
Yeah.
knowing things, experiencing cultures. How does that make you feel in regards to the future of our societies?
Well, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm presenting myself as the expert on where things are going. That would be a little bit much, certainly, specifically since I'm learning the culture as I go. But I think that the essence of Romanian culture, as I understand it, from the standpoint of where I am, I work in an academic institution. I've always worked in academic institutions. Okay. So the essence, the message that we generate to people is that it has to be about who you are at your core. Okay? We want to help you discover the best in yourself. We want to help you understand that the best in yourself is influenced by knowledge and understanding that comes before you, and you internalize that and absorb that, so then you can go out and make things better for the people who come after you than you had experienced yourself. So that for me is, I think, where Romanian culture is going, as to the degree that we can helpfully influence it at this institution, helping people understand how they can become the best they can be, so they in turn can help others to be better as well.
Yeah, that's a noble. I mean, it's the educational pursuit, right?
I was thinking about myself. I mean, if I was a professor in the US, why would I come here to Romania and take such a big challenge? I mean, there is the pandemic, and you've been here since the pandemic. There is the Ukraine tension. Romania, it's a developing country. The legal framework, it's still building up. So I'm thinking to myself, only if I would like to take a big challenge to prove to myself that I can work on my leadership skills. What was the driver? What was the motives that?
That is such an interesting question, because what you're doing is showing to me what the aspects of the American culture are that I represent, that I've internalized.
Okay.
And Americans think they can do anything, okay?
Okay.
There is no mountain that we can't conquer, no issue that we can't resolve. And so the conditions that you were talking about, which are certainly problematic, the pandemic, potential
it
war
is
and so forth,
challenging.
okay? From an American standpoint, those are just things to be checked off the list. Okay, did the other thing, whatever it is that is presented as a challenge, in fact, becomes the driving force for you to take the challenge on.
So do you have a list back home, and you just need to check things on it? So what's next for me?
The type A personality construct. Okay, so that's part again of the American ethos.
Okay.
The sense that if it's out there, it can be done. Okay. Right. Now, I think people, depending on who they are, manifest that in ways that are particular to their personality. I happen to have had, the really great benefit of having a long and successful career in America in some very fine institutions. Okay. And so my presumption is that some of the things that I learned there, I should be able to bring here and help this institution become better than it is, in the sense that there are aspects of the American culture in terms of maybe the approach to strategizing, the idea of long-term planning, those kind of things, that I should be able to bring those things here, because I think those would help the institution to become better, in a sense of being more effective and more efficient.
It is indeed true. But when you're saying institution, are you referring to the students? Are they getting this experience first-handed?
That's really what the most significant question is, and I think in some ways it's a reflection of where we are in a general global sense about institutions around the world, higher education institutions. There's a kind of an interesting global newsletter about higher education, and it's something like Universal News or something like it. It looks at institutions around the world, higher education institutions around the world, okay? And so it's interesting to see that some of the same issues and concerns that play out in Romania play out in Bolivia, play out in Canada, play out in Portugal, okay? Because the essence of the institutions are supposed to be about providing a better experience for the students, all right? Now, any organization, as it becomes kind of activated, sometimes loses sight of the opportunities that it's supposed to present for its clients to the degree that it looks out mostly for its own capability to extend itself. Higher education institutions are no different. We can get into a situation where it becomes much easier for us to do what we like to do than it is to do things for the people that we're supposed to be serving.
All right.
So that has to be an annual question, a monthly, a daily question. Are the things that we're doing the things that are going to help our students become better people?
All right.
The structures that we put in place, the processes that we have, the interactions, okay? I mean, that's why I got into the business, because the thought for me was that by getting into this field of work, you not only can help other people become better, you feel better about yourself because you're doing that. You have to be really, really careful, because you can set up a structure in which you said, here's an example, okay? Let's say that the teaching schedule for somebody has to be determined, anybody, okay? And because the person, doesn't like to get up early, they don't want to teach until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, the students have jobs that they have to work in the afternoon, okay? So you say, hey, okay, that's the way life goes, okay? If you aren't in my class at 1 o'clock, you can't take my class, okay? Or you could say, let me think about this for a minute. Maybe I can adjust a little bit so that the people that I'm supposed to be serving are actually getting what they need. Okay. So there's this constant tension, and it's not just related to higher education, but since we're talking about that, structures have a way, if you're not very careful, of serving the people in the structure rather than serving the clients that they're supposed to be there to address. So we have to, watch every day and every year that what we're doing is going to provide the best educational experience for the students.
Yeah, well, I think it's a challenge, especially in this part of the world, as the systems, like we were chatting before we started, tend to remain stable.
Yeah, static. Yeah.
Remain in their inertial state.
Absolutely.
So the challenge of trying to modify a system that doesn't want to be modified is present here, but we also see it all over our society.
Yeah.
From the teller at the institution where we have to, put some papers there or pay some taxes, to even the higher ranks of ministers and parliament and so on. So you're saying that it all boils down to education, but I also think it has to be enforced some way.
Yeah.
So how are you enforcing this here in Romania?
Yeah, but enforcement doesn't have to be a negative term.
No, of course not. It could be positive enforcement.
Yeah, right. Well, exactly, because the idea is that you live up to your values, okay?
Right.
And so when you're doing something, even unintentionally, that's contrary to what you say is important to you, then you either ought to recognize that yourself, your peers around you, the people who work with you ought to recognize it, or the people that you're supposed to be serving ought to recognize it, okay? And so you want those kind of multiple checks and balances is what we call it in the U.S., okay? To make sure that if you're kind of going off the path, so to speak, somebody is there to pull you back and say, no, you really don't want to do that, because even though it might be convenient in the short term, what it's going to do is lessen what you say that are the ultimate goals that you want to achieve.
Is this system more effective in the U.S. than here?
No.
Human nature is the same.
Not at all. I mean, we live in very complex societies now, okay? And so that's the first point of realization, okay? The more complex the society is, the more individuals and groups develop what are called differentiated needs. So when your needs are different from mine, but I have more status and power than you do, the likelihood that I'm going to push your needs aside to make sure that mine get taken care of. All right? And that's, I don't mean that to be pejorative or negative. It's a kind of a natural extension of organizational behavior.
Right.
But it also means that if, as a person, as people, we say certain things are important to us in terms of our values, we have to be careful that the structures don't contradict the values.
I totally get this part, but what I really want to know is, we as people, as Romanians, we are looking at the American leadership and the way they are doing things. We have our track record as communists, and we are building a democracy right now. So we are looking at models in the US, in European Union, and we take it and we want to import them here as they are. Are we doing that translation okay? Is there something we're missing? I mean,
it feels that we're missing something.
The map looks good, but when you're in the territory, things are way different. So you said that the system in the US, it's working somehow, but what are we Romanian missing? What we are not doing good?
I have had conversations with people that I work with that are really enlightening to me, because what comes out of the conversation, it gets back to the point that I was making before about the American spirit, if you will.
Okay.
The American spirit is, the sense that nothing is impossible for us to do. And so I sit around the table with these folks who are all very bright, very capable people, and we are talking about accomplishments, and they get embarrassed by talking about their accomplishments. And I say, I don't understand this, because in America we brag about everything, okay? Doesn't matter how small it is, we make it into a big thing. Here they've done big things and they make it into a small thing.
And we're buying it.
And I'm saying, whoa, wait a minute. No, this isn't going to work for me. It's about trying to find a way in which, number one, in the kind of macro political sense, you move away from what the attitudes were of the previous generation, which were impacted by the politics of the time. I get this often in my conversation, that there's a carryover from the communist era that people chose not to distinguish themselves. If they were doing something good, then the idea was not to say that, because then somehow you'd be differentiated from the masses.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. And there is a certain attractiveness to being humble, to not being, a person who calls too much attention to yourself. But there's also a recognition that people value and appreciate people who are good at what they do. Okay? And so if you want to build an institution, which is what we want to do, where people want to come because you have a lot of choices out there, okay? Then part of what you want to say to them is, one of the reasons you want to come is because we have good people here, okay? And we're not just saying that without validation. Look at the awards, look at the activities, look at the things that they've been involved in where they get recognition, okay? So that's part of what I think is an interesting thing for me as an American. As I talk to my Romanian colleagues, I'm trying to get them to understand, look, this post-communist trauma that you're carrying around, you need to get rid of that, okay? If you do something good, there's nothing wrong with letting people know that you are accomplished in your field.
In other words, we should build our Romanian spirit.
This, the approach that we've taken here, the slogan that we're using is American style, Romanian spirit.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because we want the best structural model that we have, efficiency and effectiveness, but we also want it to have a humane relationship quality that values people as people.
But do students understand this concept?
I'm not sure. After a year, I haven't had nearly as much connection with students as I hope to have. I'm in a situation where the use of my time is almost always in meetings and conversations and discussions with people who are kind of at the top of the food chain. That's the nature of any organization to some degree. So what I'm trying to do, again, is help the folks that I work with understand that in their communications with both their peers and with their students, that they want to communicate the essence of that message out. We want you to be good. We want you to be better. We want you to be as good as you can be. And part of the way that we can help you do that is by recognizing and acknowledging, first of all, the worth that you bring to a situation, whatever it may be, and the accomplishments that you realize while you were part of that situation. You have to leave here better than you came in, or we haven't done our job.
So you were saying earlier that you have system in place that put you back on track, and that if you have the power, you tend to undermine the needs of others. How does that apply to you? Do you have some protocols and system in place that put you back on your track?
Yeah, I have a wife. You married?
Almost, same thing.
When I was earlier on in my career, and so in America, in the academic community, what you're supposed to be able to do in order to move up the ladder, so to speak, is, quote, you have to develop a national reputation for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
You do things, you talk, you write, you do things that people notice, and eventually you kind of rise up to a level where people kind of acknowledge that you are good at what you do. Well, I have kids. Okay, so you go home and they don't care about that. Oh, you gave a lecture today, so are you going to fix dinner? That kind of thing. And I think it's important to recognize that the nature of your accomplishments cannot be the only thing that you're about as a person. And it's good to have people around you who'll be honest with you, who will call you out, okay? It's wonderful to be accomplished at whatever it is you want to do. But when you think those accomplishments are the entire sum of the person that you are, then you've gone way too far in the wrong direction.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is there has to be a person or two or three or 10 that would not have to suffer if they called you out.
Absolutely. My perspective on leadership is this. you should always encourage people to speak their minds and offer you honest critique, even if it's the opposite of what you think is the right thing to do. Okay?
Yeah, that's I think one of the most difficult things to do anywhere in the world,
Mhm.
not just in
Mhm.
Romania, where critique is regarded as disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
But like anywhere in the world, there are most people don't take critique very well, because I think the brain is hardwired
Mm-hmm.
to not accept the fact that it's doing something wrong.
Sure, sure. The problem with that is that in order for that to be effective, you have to know everything that you need to know when you need to know it. Now, I haven't gotten to that point yet, okay?
Yeah.
And so what it means, particularly when you're talking about a group of people that you're working with, a good idea, a good perspective, and a different approach, is only going to surface if you encourage people to put that on the table. Once you said, this is what I think we should do, the general course of action is for people who work under you to say, yeah, that's what we should do, okay? And so you pursue that without understanding or realizing that one of those people at the table actually had a better take on it than you do, okay? And unless you've created an atmosphere where they're free and even encouraged to do that, then you're pursuing something that might be effective but could have been even more effective if you had encouraged people to speak their minds.
Yeah, I think that's very hard to do. I mean, Marius has a team, like not one, 3 or 4 teams under his supervision.
Mm-hmm.
He has several companies that each do something different
Mm-hmm.
in the realm of technology, and I don't know how good he is at managing those teams, but he has some success.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could be bigger, and I think people are inherently afraid to speak their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that?
Yeah, that's very true. You have to let go of your pride,
Mhm.
just to
Your
let
ego.
your ego.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ego is the enemy.
There you
yeah. And on the other hand, I agree, encouraging people to speak their mind,
Mhm.
but also offer them the comfort to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You might just encourage them, and they know he's trying to get something out of it. I'm not putting that on the table. This
Mhm.
It's the
discussion.
Soviet
Yeah.
mindset.
We can go there a million times in this discussion.
Yeah.
But what I find valuable in this dialogue here, and what I'm trying to find out, how the new generations,
Mhm.
because we're watching Hollywood
Mhm.
movies, we're on social media all day, we are on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
So there are lots of ways that people are learning.
Mhm.
Lots of ways we are educating
Yeah.
ourselves.
Right.
And I'm looking at students that they should get this new style of learning.
Mhm.
What is the university doing? Is it doing it the technological way? Is there a gap? Is there a missing puzzle between how the university are teaching the students and the YouTube and Udemy and
Mhm.
whatever's going on online right now?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody honestly can keep up with that to the degree that's ideal, okay? Because the technology is changing so rapidly. So rather than talk about it from the standpoint of a particular technical approach, what you do, from my standpoint, is take a conceptual approach, okay? The conceptual approach is that the process of learning that we used to think about as from a kind of pedantic philosophical standpoint is linear. You learn this, then you learn this, and that's what made the professor important, because the professor takes you through step by step the process. Well, in fact, now it's actually more kind of almost, the meta symbol.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So you learn one thing, which takes you to something else, which takes you to something else, and the technologies now accelerate the learning first of all, and sometimes bring it back in a different direction from where it started. Okay?
Of course, and I, in my learning process, I feel more comfortable commenting on a YouTube video and speaking my mind online
All right.
than asking the professor.
Okay. And so what we have to do now is recognize that it is the system's obligation to try not only to facilitate, but to encourage the learning process that best suits the needs of the students. It comes back to the same idea that we were talking about before, all right? Now, that's not always the easiest thing to do when you've had a person, quote, who is an authority, who has learned to do it this way, to say, okay, now we're going to turn it around and do it this way, all right? But if we're going to get the most out of the experience, then it's part of the obligation of leadership to help people understand that being flexible in the approach that they take is ultimately going to be of greater benefit to the students. The more successful your students are, the more successful you are as a teacher.
All right. Is Danubius offering this right now?
I hope so.
What are your plans to the year ahead? I mean, it is the beginning of the year. The pandemic is still going on.
Yeah.
There is lots of flexibility
Sure.
and keep an open channel of communication, or maybe 10 channels of communication, considering WhatsApp, YouTube, and whatever.
And even more than that, because again, those are specific considerations that relate to technology. And I want to keep bringing it back to the significance of kind of motivating the human spirit, too. Okay? So one of the things we're going to do, today is Thursday. Next week, we're going to have an opportunity to bring in some of our friends from the American Embassy. Okay?
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they're coming here because they have loaned to the university this photographic exhibit. Okay? It's called Then and Now. And it's a time contrast of what Romania was like 30 years ago and what Romania is like now.
That's an interesting project.
All right. So you have a whole set of things that are in play there in terms of just what it means to any individual person, their concept about what society should be doing, whether or not things are substantially different personally, societally, okay? And so what we want to do is make that photo exhibit available not just to our own students, but to the entire community, all right? So you'll get someone who is 60, 70 years old who will come in and, what do these shots mean to you? Oh, God, I remember when I was, and I was a little boy and I couldn't do this. And then we want to bring in kids from high school, okay? I would ideally even like to be able to bring in kids maybe as young as maybe 10 or 11 years old, all right? Because what we're saying to them is the world is dynamic, all right?
But this is
and the way you adjust to the world in some ways is up to you. We're in a different time and place now than we were a while ago. So what does that mean to you? What do you want to do with that, okay? What are the opportunities that you see? What's the motivation that you get from looking at a set of photographs, all right?
Yeah.
So it's not just about the technical aspect is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's about trying to find something that's in everybody that says, what do I want to do with my life? And how am I going to do it?
That's an interesting opportunity for you to learn about the local
There you
culture.
go. Exactly. Right. So that's one of the things. We're doing some standard things, too, in the sense that we've just initiated 2 really important lecture series because that's what institutions do. But one of the lecture series is specifically around the empowerment of women.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's very important, especially not only in the world, but in a patriarchal society that is Romania.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We've launched a series called Phenomenal Women, and we're bringing in one speaker a month, a woman who has accomplished significant recognition in her own field, to talk about what she had to do in order to get there, what the steps were that she took, what were the successes and the problems that she encountered. We kicked it off last month with the person who is the director of Agile Press, the national news service. Okay, so Claudia Nicolette came in last month and talked about her own experiences breaking the glass ceiling, the first woman to ever head this agency. Okay, we have another speaker coming in on February 15th, a particularly interesting person because this person is a Romanian American. She's an academician in the U.S., the University of Texas. Gabriela Mosada Wilson is her name. She left Romania, I think, 25 years ago under the circumstances that we were talking about then and now.
Yeah.
All right. She's achieved great academic success in America. We're bringing her back to talk about what her life is like as a woman in America, what some of the issues, the considerations that she sees in that country, as well as her perspectives on what is happening here and what isn't happening here. Okay. And once a month, we're going to bring in people like that, people who have national recognition in whatever their field is, to talk about being a woman in society at this point in time, what it means for them and what it means for the young girls who are coming after them.
I realize now that's a wonderful opportunity for students to engage with this people.
There you go.
That's priceless, and I always think about the students, and I don't know, maybe you can give some tips for students. What should they do? I mean, look at young Harvey. 20-year-old Harvey. What would you recommend?
I can't talk about that on the radio.
Oh, come on.
Was he a mischievous? Was he so mischievous that you cannot talk about him?
Here's the thing. For young people, 20-year-olds, it's a concept that we were talking about before. The best of times, the worst of times, okay? You're 20 years old now, and it means the last 2 years you've been basically locked in your room, okay? That's the worst of times.
Yeah.
The best of times are the new technologies that are in place that literally are changing things almost every day, okay? And so for me, it comes back to the point that I was trying to make before, which is kind of the internal drive, the mechanism inside you. Part of our responsibility as a university is to help bring that out of you, okay? But inside everybody, there's this seed, if you want to call it that. The question is how much is it going to sprout? To what level is it going to grow, okay? Our responsibility is to help people, to encourage them, to nourish that seed, to help them to understand the things that they can do and connect to that will help them grow to the fullest extent that they can be. Nobody knows who the next person is who's going to cure cancer, who's going to take us in, to the
Mars
next galaxy. Okay, all right. So, the more encouragement we can offer to every individual person, the greater the likelihood that ultimately all of us will benefit from that.
I'm hearing you, Harvey, but I mean, as a student, I like to party a lot. I love the gig economy. I want to be a Uber driver, Uber Eats, delivering food. I want to, go into NFTs and blockchains and influencers, and there is lots of noise around. Help me on this path. What should I do now?
I don't ever want to put myself into a situation where I give the impression that we should make the final determination about what people should do with their lives. Okay. And I don't know that there's anything necessarily wrong with somebody saying that the best thing for me to do is to enjoy my life in the way I want to enjoy it. What we want to do is say to them, listen, you have some options that you ought to review for yourself.
Okay.
If this is the path you want to take, ultimately that's your choice. But understand that there might be other things that you should consider before you make that choice.
William, I'm being told we only have like 5 minutes left because you have a new meeting. So I really want you to go through what your plans are for the university and for Galati for the next year.
We are going to, over the course of this year, which is the 30th anniversary year, make some significant steps to establish and connect and extend specifically and particularly our relationships with a variety of American partners.
Okay.
Over the last 6 months, we have signed 5 what are called MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding, with universities in America. The intention there is to open up opportunities for American students and scholars to come here.
And vice versa.
Exactly, right. We are going to be actively engaging additional institutions. I suspect that over the next 12 months or 10 months now left in the year, we'll sign yet another dozen of those arrangements with institutions across the U.S. We're intentionally spreading out the range in the geographic sense so that if a person has more of an interest in being on the East Coast as opposed to West, North, and South, we'll be able to say to them, this is the variety of options that we want to make available to you, okay? We're instituting for this summer the first ever summer school at the university. We're bringing American students over to study here at Danubius, individuals, I think, for the most part, who've never been to this part of the world before. And this gets back to the original part of the conversation we were talking about. Americans don't have any perspective on what Eastern Europe or Romania is like, so we want to give those students a chance to come here. We had an international conference last year. We brought, I think, 6 students from America. Their eyes were just opened to what this part of the world is about, okay? We have one of their quotes on our website. He says, Romania is the best ever, okay? All right? You don't know what you don't know, okay? So the more of those kind of experiences we can put into place, the better it is for everybody concerned.
Building the Romanian spirit.
There you go, exactly. I'm working on a project right now. That's what I was saying to you before I got here. I expect that we're going to bring over a set of American scholars. These are very established and influential American higher education leaders, because now the geopolitical circumstances being what it is, people in America are really interested now in knowing what this part of the world is all about.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
So we want these folks who are already leaders in American higher education to come over and get a first-hand experience, go back and take that knowledge to their communities, to their institutions, spread the word, and just get a kind of a better understanding that operates both ways.
Oh, those are big plans. I
Yeah,
hope you achieve everything you've
So do I.
set out to do. And thank you for being yet again on
It's been
our
a
podcast.
pleasure. I hope we don't have to wait another year before we do this again.
I don't know if something new occurs. We're open to have another discussion.
Good enough.
It's very nice.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
So, deci, dragii mei, acesta a fost William P. Harvey, rectorul Universității Danubius. Pe noi ne găsiți pe Instagram, pe Facebook, pe YouTube, avem și Patreon-ul care ne susține cumva atâta timp cât cineva contribuie și oricum, dacă aveți întrebări, puteți să ne lăsați aici în comentarii, noi o să le transmitem mai departe și cu siguranță domnul rector o să le răspundă. Așa că vă urăm un weekend plăcut și ne vedem vinerea viitoare.
La revedere. Gata?
I don't know.
All right.
I don't know if we're done.
We out?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's it.
good.
That's it.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's an interesting opportunity.
Yeah.